I still remember the day my father looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not part of this family anymore." Not because I committed a crime, not because I betrayed them, but because I refused to hand over my company to my younger brother. 3 years later, the same people who threw me out were standing outside my office begging for help. And this time, I made sure they understood exactly what betrayal feels like. The story about is Ethan Cole. I grew up in the lap of luxury in Dallas, Texas. To the outside world, we were the blueprint of the perfect American family. My father sat atop a construction empire worth millions, and we lived behind gates that most people only dream of seeing. But behind those heavy oak doors, the reality was a nightmare. Everything in our universe revolved around one person, my younger brother, Ryan. Ryan was the ultimate charmer, as effortless as he was irresponsible. He treated life like a game and our father's bank account like a toy. He crashed six-figure cars, spent his weekends in a blur of parties, and somehow, despite the chaos he left in his wake, he remained the undisputed favorite. Meanwhile, I was the ghost in the machine. I didn't party. I worked. I was the straight-A student, the business degree holder, the one who stayed at the office until 2 a.m. while the rest of the family slept. By the time I turned 27, I hadn't just managed the company. I had doubled its profits. I was the engine keeping the coal empire running. But in that house, achievement was met with silence. I'll never forget one particular dinner. My mother looked at Ryan with pure adoration after he announced yet another impulsive luxury vacation. Then, she turned to me with a look of pity and said, "Ethan, you're always so serious. You should learn to enjoy life like your brother." I nearly choked on my drink. I wanted to scream that the only reason Ryan could enjoy life was because I was the one funding it. Then came the day the floor dropped out from under me. My father called a family meeting. I walked into his mahogany-lined office expecting the one thing I had earned, a promotion to CEO. Instead, I found a row of stone-faced lawyers sitting at the table. My father didn't even look me in the eye. He folded his hands and said, "We've decided. Ryan will be taking over as CEO." The room went cold. I honestly thought it was a sick joke. Ryan didn't understand the business. He barely knew where the office was. He skipped meetings, insulted clients, and was loathed by the staff. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice trembling. Then came the ultimate betrayal. My father slid a stack of legal documents across the desk. "We've also decided that for the sake of family unity, you need to transfer your shares to your brother. All of them." Years of sacrifice. Years of sweating over contracts and building a legacy. They wanted me to hand it all to a man who had never worked a day in his life. For free. When I refused, the mask finally slipped. Ryan leaned back, a smug smirk crawling across his face. "Don't be selfish for once, Ethan," he whispered. Selfish? I was the one who built the walls he lived in while he was partying in Miami. My father's face turned a violent shade of red. He slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Listen to me," he roared. "Without this family name, you are nothing." That sentence didn't break me. It woke me up. In that moment, the truth was blindingly clear. They never loved me. They only loved the labor I provided. I looked at the documents, then back at my father. I realized then that if they thought I was nothing without them, they were about to find out exactly what they were without me. The betrayal wasn't just corporate. It was absolute. By the next morning, my world had been erased. My company access was revoked. My professional email was deleted, and my office, the place where I'd spent more time than my own bedroom, was emptied as if I'd never existed. But they didn't stop there. To protect their golden boy, Ryan, my parents began a smear campaign. They told our relatives and the Dallas elite that I was mentally unstable and that I was actively trying to sabotage the family legacy out of spite. The social circle I had known since childhood turned their backs on me. My calls went to voicemail. My friends vanished into the shadows. In a single week, I lost my career, my reputation, and my family. At 28 years old, I went from a mansion to a cramped, one-bedroom apartment with barely enough cash to cover the rent. But in those dark, quiet nights, something shifted inside me. The weight of trying to earn my father's approval, a weight I'd carried for nearly 3 decades, finally fell away. For the first time, I wasn't the good son. I became something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose. I didn't try to crawl back. I didn't beg. Instead, I went to work in the shadows. I started by consulting for small, independent construction firms that my father's company used to overlook. While doing that, I realized the entire industry was stuck in the past. So I spent my nights coding. I developed a proprietary software system designed to help contractors automate project management and cut costs in half. At first, I was a ghost. Nobody in the industry even noticed I was there. But within a year, the Ethan Cole effect exploded across the state of Texas. Companies using my technology were saving millions. My system was faster, smarter, and more efficient than anything on the market. Soon, venture capitalists and investors weren't just calling me. They were fighting for a seat at my table, but they didn't stop there. To protect their golden boy, Ryan, my parents began a smear campaign. They told our relatives and the Dallas elite that I was mentally unstable and that I was actively trying to sabotage the family legacy out of spite. The social circle I had known since childhood turned their backs on me. My calls went to voicemail. My friends vanished into the shadows. In a single week, I lost my career, my reputation, and my family. At 28 years old, I went from a mansion to a cramped, one-bedroom apartment with barely enough cash to cover the rent. But in those dark, quiet nights, something shifted inside me. The weight of trying to earn my father's approval, a weight I'd carried for nearly 3 decades, finally fell away. For the first time, I wasn't the good son. I became something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose. I didn't try to crawl back. I didn't beg. Instead, I went to work in the shadows. I started by consulting for small, independent construction firms that my father's company used to overlook. While doing that, I realized the entire industry was stuck in the past. So, I spent my nights coding. I developed a proprietary software system designed to help contractors automate project management and cut costs in half. At first, I was a ghost. Nobody in the industry even noticed I was there. But within a year, the Ethan Cole effect exploded across the state of Texas. Companies using my technology were saving millions. My system was faster, smarter, and more efficient than anything on the market. Soon, venture capitalists and investors weren't just calling me. They were fighting for a seat at my table. By year 2, I officially launched my own empire, Cole Dynamics. Unlike my father's business, which relied on old-fashioned cronyism and brute force, my company was built for the future. We weren't just building structures. We were revolutionizing how the world built them. Within 3 years, Cole Dynamics was valued at over $80 million. Then one crisp morning, I opened the financial news and saw the headline I had been waiting for. My family's company was in a total freefall. It was exactly what I had predicted. Ryan had bled it dry. Between his disastrous investments, A string of high-profile lawsuits and massive debt. The Cole family empire was a sinking ship. The best employees had already jumped overboard. Karma was finally coming home to roost. But the universe wasn't finished with the irony just yet. Because as I sat in my glass-walled office overlooking the city, my assistant buzzed my desk. "Mr. Cole, there's a man in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I looked at the security feed and felt a cold, sharp smile spread across my face. It was my father. From behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of my executive suite, I watched him. The man who had once loomed like a giant, the man who had screamed that I was nothing, now sat nervously in my lobby. He looked older, fragile, even. The sharp edges of his personality had been dulled by defeat. When he finally entered my office, he tried to put on a mask of his old confidence, but it slipped the moment he sat down. I could see the slight, rhythmic tremor in his hands. He cleared his throat and finally spoke the words he thought would fix everything. "Ethan, we need your help."
"No, Vincent."
"No, we were wrong to doubt you." "No, I've missed my son." Just a cold, transactional plea for a lifeline. It was classic. He laid it all out. The company was suffocating under a mountain of debt. The banks were circling like vultures, threatening lawsuits that would strip them of everything.
And Ryan?
The golden boy had vanished, fleeing the country after losing millions in reckless, high-stakes gambling and failed investments. Then, my father looked me in the eye and said the most delusional thing I had ever heard. "You owe this family, Ethan. It's your duty to save what we built." A dry, hollow laugh escaped my throat. "Owe you?" I repeated. "After you assassinated my character? After you erased my existence and left me with nothing?"
"No.
You've got it backwards. You owe me." For the first time in my life, the power dynamic had completely shifted. The silence in the room was deafening. He had no leverage, no threats, and no power. He was just a man begging for mercy from the son he had discarded. The justice protocol. Most people think revenge is about anger. But anger is messy. I didn't want to fight. I wanted justice. I leaned across the mahogany desk and made my father an offer that felt like a death sentence. "I will save the company," I said, my voice cold and steady. "But there is a condition, a non-negotiable one. I become the sole owner. 100% equity. Total control. Ryan is removed permanently. You and Mom are removed from the board.
No interference."
Nothing. My father's face went ghost white. The empire he had spent 30 years building, the legacy he valued more than his own flesh and blood, would now belong entirely to the son he had betrayed. He tried to negotiate, his voice cracking as he spoke of family legacy. I didn't let him finish. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had conquered on my own. "You taught me a very valuable lesson that day in your office," I said without looking back. "In business, emotions mean nothing. You made this a business transaction 3 years ago. I'm just finishing it." The room went silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, with a shaking hand, he picked up the pen.
He signed.
And just like that, everything he had tried to keep from me became mine. The final reveal. But the story didn't end with a signature. A few weeks after the takeover, a retired executive who had served under my grandfather approached me with a folder of old documents.
What I found inside shattered me.
Years ago, my grandfather's original will had explicitly named me as the successor to the company. He had seen my potential before I even knew it myself. But after his death, my father had manipulated the documents and changed the plan to favor Ryan. That was the reason they had pushed me out so aggressively. They weren't just protecting Ryan. They were terrified that if I stayed, I would eventually uncover the truth of their theft. That revelation cut deeper than the original betrayal. It proved that I was never rejected because I was incapable or unstable. I was rejected because I was a threat. They didn't cast me out because I was nothing. They cast me out because they knew that, given the chance, I would become everything. People think revenge is about destroying others. It's not. The greatest revenge is becoming successful without the people who doubted you. My family spent years trying to convince me I was worthless. But in the end, the son they betrayed became the man who owned everything. And the people who abandoned me now live with the consequences of their choices every single day. So if someone ever underestimates you, don't waste time proving them wrong. Build a life so successful they regret losing you.